Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra metagame breakdown, the first one since the latest balance patch, to give you a better idea of what the top 5 most popular and the top 5 highest win rate decks currently look like, and give you some thoughts on the lists and how I feel the metagame currently is shaping up. Alright, before we dive right in, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below to turn on the notification icon if you haven't yet, and otherwise, let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor before we talk about the decks. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's start with the 5 most popular decks. Starting in 5th place, we have Demacia Bilgewater Scouts. The most popular list right now seems to be this Quinn list with Petty Officer as an additional splash. And the overall win rate I also included since recent videos, so you get a better full picture. So close to 1,000 games. Keep in mind we are looking at Masters only. List is pretty straightforward, really. 3-row post is kind of rare these days. And I gotta say, I'm not the biggest fan of this Petty Officer splash, since Petty Officer is quite good, but it hurts your Bannerman quite a lot. And I actually think Laurent Protégé is kind of underplayed and really good, so I would recommend trying Laurent Protégé over Officer. It doesn't go as wide, but it's really powerful, both with Misfortune and with your buffs, Bannerman, Genevieve, Warchefs, and even Protector in the other buffs. It's just a really good card, and possibly better than Petty Officer even, and it's in your own regions. And even if it's similarly good as Petty Officer, it's better because it is a Demacia card, so your Bannerman whiffs less often. But yeah, the deck is fine. I tried it a bunch myself. I don't like it enough to play it, honestly. I'm usually going like 6-4-ish over 10 games, so around 60%, which is kind of like my second tier win rate. With the good decks, I usually go like 7-3 or better over 10 games on average. And yeah, this deck just hasn't really done it for me lately. Some other people had more success with it. I would be surprised if it has to do with me not playing the deck that well, because it's the kind of deck that I'm really like and that I'm pretty good at playing normally. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just some variance and I'm getting like the worse end and other people getting like the good end, and the reality is somewhere in between. But to be fair, if you look at High Masters, there aren't a whole lot of people playing the deck either. So it's probably like a fine deck, but not that great. But it's very robust, like you're not gonna like, it's not a bad deck. So if you like it, feel free to play it, but you can probably do better. Next we have Deep. Deep is making a bit of a comeback right now. Honestly, not entirely sure why. I initially thought it might be kind of good against the Bane of Twisted Fate Ezreal, but so far my impression has been that that is not actually the case, and the matchup is seems fairly favorable for Ezreal Twisted Fate, or at least not unfavorable, making this deck a lot less attractive, in my opinion. I never liked the deck too much, never been too impressed with it. It's very good at a few very specific things, and pretty underwhelming in most other scenarios. Like the deck is quite clunky, doesn't play that well from behind, gets overwhelmed and overrun pretty well, especially lists like this that don't run any Ruination. They basically have no chance of realistically ever beating discard aggro, Demacia aggro decks, stuff like that. So yeah, if you play deep, I would really recommend playing at least 2 Ruination to have a shot against the decks that go under you, take over the board, and you just don't really have the tools to get it back, because turn 7 you drop Nautilus and turn 8 you start getting back the board. That's not going to be enough. You need to turn 6 Ruination or you lose the game usually. Otherwise, I have no idea why people are playing Riptide main. The card's pretty bad if you don't have Nautilus, and if you have Nautilus, you're already doing pretty well and have better things to do, plus you have additional Riptides from your Nautilus. So yeah, I don't quite get it. Seems pretty mediocre to me. Atrocity, I can see 1, 2 seems a bit excessive in a lot of matchups. That's not what you care about or what you need, and then you have this Atrocity in hand and you just die. But yeah, I guess some people are doing fine with it. I've never liked it, never been impressed by it or playing against it. But it's seeing a more of a surge, which I guess makes sense since it's one of the decks that also hasn't been nerfed, and one of the better options for home for the good Shadow Isles control cards, I guess. But yeah, Rom and Nivea might still be a better deck, for example, or just Karma control, stuff like that. Next, in 3rd place, we have the new Draven Jinx discard aggro. And all I can tell you guys is it's not what it's hyped up to be. The buffs were really great. The problem is the metagame right now is pretty hostile to it. It gets obliterated by Twisted Fate Ezreal. The deck just tears you apart. It's rough against Demacia decks. And then there isn't that much left. This list has some major flaws, in my opinion. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of like Mystic Shot Get Excited, but that's something that I'm not 100% sure about, and that's fine. If you want to like go down that route, that's fine. But even if you want to go in the direction this list is going, I think you absolutely need to play Academic over Draven's Biggest Fan, and you have to play 6 1-drops, not 5. So what I would probably do is shave down a Rummage, play 3 Biggest Fan, and replace the Zivy or Zivy or whatever you call her with Experimenter. I think Zivy is cute, but there are a lot of like low impact cards in the deck. So if you draw them and you draw 2, that doesn't really do a whole lot for you. While the tempo swing plus resource advantage from Experimenter is much more powerful and much more immediate. It gives you 3 different cards rather than like 2 of the same cards each turn. Also, it gives you board impact and interaction, which is pretty good. So Zivy, if Experimenter wouldn't exist, I think 2 Zivy would be fine, and she's a pretty solid card, but I think Experimenter is just too much better. I also at this point would consider running even potentially 0 Rummage, because between 6 sort of half Rummage units and Experimenter and all the other stuff, you actually have quite a lot of cycling and can focus more on aggression and efficiency. And I actually found Rummage to be kind of lackluster and ending up in my Sump Dredgers and my Urchins and stuff quite a bunch. So it still has appeal because it lets you like flip Jinx faster and easier, which is nice. So I could totally see still running some number, but currently I'm just on like 3 Experimenters, 6 1-drops, no Rummage. Or like 1 Rummage or 1 Combat Trick in the 1 last slot. But yeah, you could also go like 2 Experimenter and 2 Rummage, for example, stuff like that. Because Rummage is also nice with Apprentice. The other thing is, I think 3 Experimenter is a lot better now than it used to be, because you have more ways to cycle the second if you draw 2, so the second isn't automatically going into your first Experimenter, therefore being a dead card. So it increases your chance of always having an Experimenter when you want one, and gives you more opportunities to get rid of it if you don't want it without losing a card. So that makes the diminishing returns of 3 Experimenter from the past, we only had rummages, a lot less of a big deal. The other thing with rummages, it's still kind of nice with Draven's Axis, obviously, but the other thing is, rummage in itself is card disadvantage, so if you don't have stuff to rummage away that you really, that generates value, like the free discard cards, and Axis that are free cards, you're actually kind of like putting yourself down on cards unnecessarily, while some Treasure and Urchin are both cards that give you half a rummage for free, while rummage costs you a full card to get 2 of these rummage effects, like 2 discard draw effects. But yeah, deck is unfortunately pretty mediocrely positioned. Played it a bunch, ran around 60%, probably around Scouts, maybe a bit worse. I think the win rate of the deck is always lower on mobalytics than it should be. Last time I played and liked the deck, I was crushing and having like 70% win rate over like 100 something games, and on mobalytics it had like below 50%, which leads me to believe that people are either playing bad versions and or piloting them poorly, because the deck is probably not as easy as people think it to be. But yeah, even in like competent hands, the deck barely gets to like 60% from my testing. I tested various versions. Mystic Shot, Get Excited, Just Get Excited. None of the 2 with crowd favorite, similar to my old version. All of them did okay, and like had like high rolls where I went like 8-2 over 10 games, but then evened out into like 12-8 over 20 and stuff like that. The deck just like the thing is also like, obviously these are small sample size and stuff, but what you need to understand is that I'm using those to double check my impression of how the games feel and how the deck performs in the games. And the overall result after the 20 games, together with the overall experience and feel of the 20 games, line up pretty well. So it's not like the deck felt like it got unlucky or underperformed. The deck just doesn't feel like it's that well positioned. There are a lot of things that just kind of shut you down. Like, for example, Twisted Fate Ezreal in particular is very egregious in the matchup. Is pretty horrible if the opponent plays a decent list and plays it well. Like, I have been crushing discard decks left and right with Twisted Fate Ezreal. Next we have Twisted Fate Ezreal. No idea why it's in second place, honestly. I think this is by far the best deck in the current format. The deck feels kind of broken. It feels way better than anything else, like not close. But maybe people need some time to catch up on it. I've been crushing it with like around 75% win rate over by now 60s, close to 80 games. Deck feels amazing. I've even been trying other champions instead of Ezreal. Deck crushes no matter whether you play Ezreal, Gangplank, or Vi in it, really. This version I can't recommend. I have a really extensive deck tech on the deck where I talk about all the card choices and the things you shouldn't be doing, in my opinion, and why. I'll link it up here if you haven't seen it already, or just check it on the channel page. It's the latest deck tech. Listen to it if you're interested in the archetype. I think this deck is amazing, and if you want to win as much as you can on ladder right now, play this deck, learn this deck, crush. Which brings me to the win rate. The win rate is laughably low, but I think it's the kind of win rate you get with these decks that apparently aren't as easy to play as they might seem to me. And people not piloting them well, playing bad versions, and suddenly you get a win rate that is this low. Like, this is not just low relative to my win rate, it's also low relative to like other good deck win rates on mobalytics. Like, a deck like this that is this good, in my experience, normally would have a win rate in Master closer to like around the 60%, while in the past Ezreal decks have always struggled with like win rates across the board in mobalytics. I figured this is much more straightforward and less sort of fragile in how it plays, that it would have a higher win rate, but it Turns out that's apparently not the case. But what I can say from my own experience is that you should really take these mobalytics stats with a grain of salt. They are just the average performance of all the players in Master, basically, that feed into these stats. While, the deck from an individual pilot with a good list that plays it well can easily reach like 15-20% higher win rate than this over a large amount of games, especially at a time like right now where the deck is insanely well positioned. There's literally no matchup on ladder that I'm facing where I'm concerned or where I'm like, I don't want to face this. This is likely going to be a loss for me. I'm just like rolling over most people, and the games that I lose are just like some close games that you lose because you can't win them all, but not like specific matchups that I keep losing to over and over and feel unfavored against. Alright, and last but not least, we have the highest popularity deck in Ashe, Sejuani. This deck has been doing pretty well. This is the most popular version right now. It's a bit weird, honestly. Like, I actually made a bit of a mistake. I just realized when I look at the champion stats. Give me a second. I think the most popular list in Master by now is actually, let me double check. Yeah, the most popular version is the more traditional one now, actually. This used to be the most popular. This changed. I messed up the screenshot there. Sorry about that. But yeah, basically the more traditional version with Babbling Björk and Hearthguard over Kato and Reckless Trifarian is the more common one, just all 3-offs, and with Avaros and Sentries. People are playing some weird numbers. They're only playing 2 Brittle Steels, which in some versions, which really isn't right. I've been quite liking the Kato Reckless Trifarian list, and I can see it being better against something like Twisted Fate Ezreal, so you might want to give that a try anyway. Can't recommend the Tavern Keepers, that's kind of a weird choice. This is similar to a list that I saw Fresh Lobster play. I recommend in regard to this archetype to check the various variants yourself in the mobalytics stats that I'm linking in the description down below to get a better idea of the different versions of the archetype, since people are playing all kinds of versions really. But I would recommend to Reckoning. The card's often the most scary card in the entire deck from my perspective playing against the deck. Not a big fan of Fury. I like 1 or 2 Pharaons. Have tried the deck. Deck is solid, but I actually haven't been that impressed with it. I have been doing better with it than, say, with like Discard Aggro or Scouts, for example, but notably worse than with decks like Twisted Fate Ezreal, for example, or like Karma Ezreal before it got nerfed and worse, and stuff like that. So I had like a bit over 60% probably, 65% or something. So kind of like in the middle ground between the decks that I think are not quite good enough to play them on ladder, if you care about climbing, and a bit below the decks that I prefer to climb with, like Twisted Fate Ezreal. But yeah, it's a solid deck. It's pretty popular, but I think it's a bit overplayed. But it's better than it has been at any other point in the past, probably still. Alright, this brings us to the top 5 highest win rate decks. In 5th place, we have the old Misfortune Sejuani deck. This deck's very solid. If you play it though, please don't play Ruthless Raider. I have no idea why you would want to do that to your Allegiance and to your Curve and everything. Just play a 3rd hired gun and keep playing Black Market Merchant. There's nothing wrong with Black Market Merchant, but there's so much wrong with this list. It was the most popular list, but yeah, there's a lot to criticize here. Play 3 Grifter, please. Card is good. Hunting Fleet is an interesting thing to try. would probably have to play it instead of Navigator, because otherwise you have way too many 4s. So these numbers are really wild. Not running 3 Petty Officer is a crime. Make It Rain is a bit of a debate whether or not. Some people run it, some people don't. You could also run Deckhand if you run Make It Rain instead of Black Market Merchant, but I think Merchant is still like quite good. And you probably should be running 3 Warning Shot, especially with these 2 Grifters. So yeah, this list is not exactly what I would recommend, but it's the most popular and like best performing list on mobalytics. So this is what people might be playing against you, keep that in mind. But if you want to play it yourself, clean the list up, play a more streamlined version with more good cards, rather than this sort of mess with unnecessary cards that mess with your allegiance and less of your good allegiance card that also enables your Rex and your like Warning Shot synergies. This list is, yeah, quite wild. But this deck's actually pretty solid. I tried it a bunch. I really liked how it did against Karma Ezreal, which now has faded. But I think it's a worse Riptide Rex deck than Twisted Fate Ezreal, although it could actually be good against Twisted Fate Ezreal in the pseudo mirror. It's not very popular, I haven't faced it much, but when I faced it I kind of had the impression that it could be unfavorable, because they just do the like throwing stuff on the board and taking control of the board much better than you, because you can't kill all their stuff and match their stuff with your stuff. So you kind of like fall behind and then their Rex becomes stronger than yours. But yeah, give this deck a try, seems pretty solid. It can at times be a bit rough against Ashe Sejuani. Initially I thought it was pretty bad, but by now I think it might actually like be pretty even-ish. Potentially, I'm not 100% sure. Later impressions are kind of hard to judge there. But it's a deck worth trying again, but this version is a bit of a mess. Next we have Twisted Fate Ezreal. Already commented on the win rate. The win rate is laughable. I think it's by far the best deck in the format. It is just completely obliterating everything. Deck feels insane, but yeah. Please watch my deck tech, listen to my reasoning, try my list. That's I think the best you can do with the archetype right now. I've been doing quite a bunch of thinking and testing and theory crafting on the deck, and very confident in my 40 of the archetype, except that I would probably by now swap Ezreal for Gangplank, since that kind of makes the deck even a bit better and hit a bit harder, have a bit more board presence, and even sort of better in the mirror, because like I mentioned in the deck's actually not a very good Ezreal deck, and Ezreal is not like super important to the deck. You just need a good champion. Ezreal is a good champion and just as a unit, but I think if you don't use him as like a combo win condition much, Gangplank is the better unit for the deck. Next we have the return of Endure Shadow Isles. Same old list as always, basically. Only 2 collectors seems pretty wrong to me, honestly. I would totally try and find room for the third collector, and given that this list doesn't run any aristocrats, would probably cut a Butcher for a collector, since Butcher is really not that hot if your only good target is Keeper. So yeah, otherwise deck's very solid. Also one of the decks that is one of the better decks potentially against Twisted Fate Ezreal, probably a part of why it is making a comeback, because it just kind of like has a really strong and explosive board presence, and also the deck is kind of soft against a big Dehu Endure, especially if you have Atrocity to fling it, if they can somehow stun it with Twisted Fate. So yeah, this is another deck to try again. I still feel like it's more of a tier 2 deck in terms of its power level across the board, but if you're facing a lot of Twisted Fate Ezreal and wanna try and beat them, this might be a good direction to go. Then we have Ashe Sejuani. This is the list, by the way, that I wanted to also show you for the most popular list, because in Master that's both the most popular and also the best performing list. It has a win rate of around 58%, this specific list. Anyways, So yeah, check it out. This list is actually pretty well built for the most part. The one thing that I really don't like is only 2 brittle steel. That's just very questionable. I would probably like shave a Bjerg or something. The deck has 3 4-drops, which is way too many, I think. And you already have like card draw with Assessor and stuff. So yeah, maybe shave a Bjerg for a brittle steel, and then the list looks pretty solid. And yeah, this is the highest win rate of the like more popular decks, and then we have a like lower popularity deck with a higher win rate in Scouts and the Quinn version. Keep in mind, I compiled the Quinn and the Lucian versions for the popularity count, but for the win rate, I separated them since the Misfortune Quinn variant at 542 games has a pretty high win rate, and the sample size is decent enough to tell you something that the tendency seems to be, from the people that I've seen on Twitter with lists that have been doing well in high masters, have tendentially preferred Quinn. So it seems like Quinn might be the right direction to go. Still, skeptical of the Officer 3 riposte, might be a bit clunky. Stuff like that. But yeah, this is doing really well. A bit surprised, honestly, because it is decent against Twisted Fate Ezreal. Not sure how good, depends a bit. It's probably a close matchup. But I have real concerns of how this deck fares against Ashe Sejuani, and would assume that that matchup is notably unfavorable, and yeah, makes me a bit surprised that the deck is doing this well. Then again, it's a deck that is pretty straightforward to play, so I think more people yeah, are closer to like the real win rate of the deck, and as opposed to some of the other decks that we looked at. There's still like quite a bunch you can play with this deck and get out of it by playing well, but the percentage gain will be smaller than in some other decks, where with Twisted Fate Ezreal, there's probably room for like, I don't know, 15%, 10-15% win rate gain, while here the gain is probably below 5%, in order to like, yeah, pilot the deck optimally. So that kind of, yeah, has also shifted my perspective more and more on these stats. Than like, if you play some of these decks that have low win rates on mobalytics and play them for like larger amounts of games and crush ladder with them, and then you see these low win rates on mobalytics, you gotta try and figure out what the reason is, and the reason most likely is that there's too many people not playing good lists and playing the deck well enough, and therefore bringing down the win rate massively. Because keep in mind, even in Master, there's still a pretty big discrepancy in play skill between like the top 50, top 100 players and the rest of Master, for example. So yeah, hope that was helpful to you guys. Gives you an idea where the metagame's at. I think the format seems pretty balanced. The win rates seem fairly close together. They're actually quite low right now. Like the highest win rate deck being below 60% and being like a kind of not so popular lower sample size deck. It's pretty extreme. Normally we have decks much higher, like the top decks are around 60, above 60%, and even maybe like a lower sample size deck with 62, 63%. And right now this is the like highest we get, which either means the format might be particularly balanced right now, or and more open, because obviously if the top 5 decks are still all kind of the same percentage difference to each other, but 5% higher overall than now, just means the rest of the field is further off, but the top decks are still kind of balanced among each other, while here it seems like the highest win rate decks are not that far away from the like less good decks, the rest of the field, while also being still kind of close together. Or the other option is the metagame, since it's pretty fresh, hasn't been really figured out. People are still sort of getting the hang of things, and we might see a tightening. Like I would hope that we see an uptick in the overall stats for, say, Twisted Fate Azrael, because the deck is so much better than the stats indicate. I think it's like the best deck, and not by a bit, by like a large amount. Like nothing that I touched in the game since Karma Azrael has felt this good. Like my stats are also similar to Karma Azrael. And I have played other Azrael decks, and I have played other Azrael decks in the past, and none of them felt remotely as good as either this Twisted Fate Azrael or as the Karma Azrael before that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, don't forget to hit the like button on the way out and subscribe, turn on notification icon to not miss out on future content. I got some more highlights from recent streams with Twisted Fate Azrael and Elusive and stuff like that. Some cool games to share with you, and I'll probably try and put out another deck tag over the weekend. So more stuff to come, and in the meantime, you can check my Twitch in the description down below, and catch me live stream, hang out, talk, learn from me, ask me questions, watch me play, try decks and stuff like that, or just climb with Azrael Twisted Fate, or rather Gangplank Twisted Fate by now, and so on and so forth. Also show the sponsors some love in the description down below. They are kind enough to support my content, so support them to help support me. Yeah, that's it again for this time. I'm your host, ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.